Mostly known today for their furniture, the Roycrofters were also known for their fine book production, which through most phases of the process was done by hand. Hubbard was by no means a free thinker, but he identified with Ingersoll. I seem to remember a quote somewhere that said that he cleaned up religion for him. So he was a firm believer, but he took care of all the fallacies of religion and things like that, so the untrue faiths would still will be destroyed. Let me see. Crimes Against Criminals, that's one of the works here. This is a nice calfskin edition that we have, and you can see very ornate, very well printed, and put together by hand. This calfskin is still in very, very good condition considering it's over 100 years old. Hubbard also wrote Little Journeys to the Home of Robert G. Ingersoll as a part of his Little Journeys series. And this was a little bit of a, I want to say a monthly, but it pretty much was a serial that he continued to have every month would be somebody different. And since he identified with Ingersoll, he went to his home and wrote a nice fanciful little account of his trip there. Not really necessarily anything about Ingersoll, or some things, but just, oh, I had a nice trip there and I saw this, and that's what these really amounted to being. The series included journeys to the homes of orators, artists, and philosophers, each coming out once a month. He later reprinted the serial version into hardcover editions. He also included the Little Journeys text within the publishing of The Liberty of Man, Woman, and Child. And here's a couple more looks at that. There's another older version, and this here is a hardcover version of the Little Journeys. But you can also see there also, a lot of them are hand printed, and the coloration is really wonderful with a lot of these books. Hubbard died on May 7th, 1915 on board the Lusitania when it was sunk by a German U-boat. Hubbard's son took over, but the community eventually fell apart. The legacy of these handicrafted books endures today. Little Blue Books, that's Emanuel Haldeman Julius. He was the publisher of the Little Blue Books series and was also a publisher of Ingersoll. Haldeman Julius wanted to give books and information to the masses and started publishing small, blue-bound paperback books under the auspices of the socialist newspaper Appeal to Reason that he owned. They could appear under any number of titles, including Appeal to Reason series, People's Pocket series, 5-cent pocket series, 10-cent pocket series, and eventually the Little Blue Book series. Even the Little Blue Book series was a misnomer because eventually they started publishing out into different colors of the books, but they still say Little Blue Books. These books were the first mass market paperbacks in the United States, and Haldeman Julius published titles on all these sorts of subjects, including areas that attack religion. Ingersoll's works, like Crimes Against Criminals and the Gods, were integral parts of Haldeman Julius's publishing efforts, and he freely used them. Ingersoll died on July 21st, 1899, just a few short weeks of his 66th birthday. After he died, Farrell continued to publish, as we know from earlier, and other publishers were also continuing to publish his works. However, there were a few unscrupulous people out there who took Ingersoll's death to their advantage. I briefly discussed earlier that Ingersoll had taken a personal interest in defending Thomas Paine and worked vigorously to prove that Paine did not have a deathbed conversion. As it turns out, he was a target himself. In March 1906, after hearing the stories that were not in print as of yet, that Ingersoll had recanted his agnosticism, the family signed an affidavit stating that no such recantation had occurred. A gentleman named Archie Berry followed with his own affidavit and stated the following: I do hereby declare that Robert Ingersoll confessed to my father, Johiel S. Berry, on his dying bed, that he did not believe the doctrine he preached. He said these words, Johiel, I wish I had my life to live over again. When asked why, he said, because I do not believe what I have preached and never have. I only did this for the money that was in it. Ava, Ingersoll's widow, followed with another statement of an affidavit that stated, that no one by the name of Barry was present at the death of her late husband. Maud, Ingersoll's daughter, also concurred. The family's later affidavits contradict Barry's affidavit not only in words, but also because Ingersoll had died so suddenly, no one could be called to his deathbed to make such a recantation or to hear one. So that's a contradiction in itself, I guess. This particular pamphlet was written by Warren C. Barnes, and it was published by the American Secular Union after 1910. And it has a text of all the various affidavits and the poem, The Declaration of the Free, which was Ingersoll's last. I found a particular item a little while ago. I was going through some of Gordon Stein's old materials, and it was donated to the Center for Inquiries, but it's only a photocopy that I have, so let me tell you that right now. It is called A Message from Robert G. Ingersoll, transmitted by automatic writing through a Philadelphia psychic. According to this photocopy, it was copyrighted in 1904. A little bit about this pamphlet's in order here. The pamphlet itself is 23 pages long. There is an introduction that establishes that this psychic from Philadelphia had contacted Ingersoll on the other side and produced a message that that was published in a serial. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost here. It produced a message that was published in a periodical called The Sermon in 1903. My goodness, I'm losing my mind here. The introduction also includes a statement from Ingersoll himself stating that the earlier article in the sermon was not satisfying to him and that he wanted to further discuss his experience on the other side, and this was his purpose for this publication. The introduction ends with the initials MEM, and Ingersoll's experiences after the veil was lifted proceed for the next 18 pages. Here's the opening lines. To my friends of earth, death lifts the veil and parts gloomy shutters surrounding the mortal mind. Brighter and better life enters in as the so-called death steals away the dimmed and dying light which had been furnished to light the mortal mind until it had furnished the inner light of intelligence and strength to ascend to the blissful fields of ripening grain. But my shaking off of the outer covering to my true self was sudden and unexpected. No thought of this so-called death putting me in touch with what God alone knew and made me experience with love, not malice. That's pretty eloquent, but that was a very long sentence, too. I brought this pamphlet to the attention of Dr. Joe Nickel, the Senior Research Fellow at CSI, which is now the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which was formerly known as PsyCop. His interest in automatic writing, and with the Center for Inquiry's relationship to the Ingersoll Birthplace Museum, I thought Joe would be interested. In fact, he was, and he decided to launch a full-fledged investigation into this piece. And I was asked to assist. I was to work from a bibliographical information side, yes, and I was to try and get the publishing history, look for further copies, and possibly more information. Joe was going to examine the piece for clues as to who really wrote it, comparing Ingersoll's known writings, and compare the text of the work. If possible, after I discovered who the Philadelphia psychic was, I was to try and find other writings by this person. I started by searching OCLC, which is a database used by libraries to share resources, like bibliographic records or to share